Good afternoon to everybody being in Europe, and good morning to everybody being the other side of the Atlantic, means US and Canada. It's okay, you listen? Yeah. Miss Assistant Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, we're extremely happy for this online event. Maybe we are more happy if we have in person, but okay, we will do that later on in the year in person. Your presence, Mrs. Besancenot, our new Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, emphasize and symbolize the cooperation between NATO and Atlantic Treaty Association, as well as the continuation of a long tradition going back 70 years ago. With the today event, we like in the Atlantic Treaty Association to start the beginning of celebration for the 70th anniversary of NATO, but also we like to start celebration for the 70th anniversary of the Atlantic Treaty Association established in 1954 in Netherlands by the report of the three wise men, as everybody knows. The Atlantic Treaty Association has served 70 years the alliance values. Through transparency of our action and the information we share openly about all aspects of our work, we support the preservation and extension of our Atlantic community. By so doing, we honor the vision of great Atlantists who show that the security of both sides of the Atlantic are inextricably tied because we share the same democratic values of peace, freedom, and well-being. And this is very important in the days that we are and in the very future. The Atlantic Treaty Association and the national committees, they have tried hard to defend and develop the basic principle of the treaty: peace, freedom, well-being, security, and confidence between our people. Dear friends, membership in an international organization is nothing more than a promise and a commitment by each of its members to be part of community of values and to act democratically and militarily to protect that community of values. Public support guarantees the political will of the signature to be member of an international organization, but public support provides the legitimacy, which matters as much as power does. As everybody knows, public support requires an educated public, and an educated public means education, transparency, and understanding the reason for being member of NATO, of an international organization, and how this issue affects their lives. I repeat different times that I believe that without recognition and public support, NATO's future will be at risk, not because there is no role and task for NATO, but because sufficient public recognition and support are essential requirements for the long-term survival of any democratic society. Ms. Secretary General, before I give you the floor as our keynote speaker of tonight, I like officially welcome the Atlantic Council of Sweden. As the Secretary General of NATO has declared some weeks ago, NATO will be stronger with Sweden in, Sweden safer, and the whole alliance more secure. The Atlantic Council of Sweden started our cooperation with our organization many years ago, since Sweden joined the PFP in 1994. And they worked with us very hard. And I like to mention the contribution of persons, maybe she informed me that she is with us, of Anne-Sophie Dahl, who was the first Secretary General and one of the co-founders of the Atlantic Council of Sweden. Also, Mr. Paul Johnson, your Minister of Defense, who was a member of our community, of our Atlantic community. He was years ago member of the youth organization of Sweden, of the Atlantic Council of Sweden. Mrs. President of the Atlantic Council of Sweden, our constitution underlines that if a country becomes member of the alliance, automatically each council will become member of the Atlantic Treaty Association. So your council is now a full member of the Atlantic Treaty Association, and I like to applaud for that. And everybody. And we like to welcome you. And now you have the floor. The president of the Atlantic Council of Sweden was Ms. Annika Engblom. She was member of the parliament for many years, of the Swedish parliament. So you have the floor, Mrs. President.
Thank you, dear President, and thank you, Theo, and Ms. Assistant Secretary General, distinguished speakers, and fellow NATO members, and thank you very much. It's a great honor and a great joy to participate in this seminar today as full-fledged members of the Atlantic Council or the Atlantic Treaty Association, and of course, as of the 7th of March, my country, Sweden, finally joining NATO after many years of declaring being non-aligned, military-wise, and neutral. I would say that it has been first of all, as you did, Theo, I would like to commemorate the two founders of the Swedish Atlantic Council, which was founded in Sweden in 1996. And that is Ms. Dahl, Anne-Sophie Dahl, who is today a senior advisor for Atlantic Council, and Henrik Landerholm, who is today the National Security Advisor of Sweden. But also, of course, bring the greetings of our Minister of Finance, Paul Johnson. He couldn't be with us today, there are busy days, but still, he really has his warm heart for our organization a long time ago. Well, Sweden, although being non-military, non-aligned, we have cooperated with both NATO as within the Partnership for Peace program since '94, and has been in collaboration with ATA since 1996, and has been promoting for NATO membership, but also to arrange seminars, conferences and trips to uphold the debate of the importance of both national, European, but also transatlantic links within foreign and security policy. And this is moreover even important today, and we hope to contribute in any way that we can. We are now treading towards, and now the work begins, so to speak, since the debate in Sweden about NATO, Sweden becoming a member of NATO has been on and off, I would say. It's now very vivid, and there is a vast majority of the Swedish people who are in favor of NATO membership. But we have a way ahead of us of, as you underline, Theo, the task of educating, upholding debate, of the importance of, well, as for all the citizens in our member states and members of ATA, that it's not only the government or the military forces that joins the alliance, but the whole of the people. And in regarding, of course, the civic society and its role, according to Article 3. We also now really put hard work into promoting a future membership for Ukraine. We have a lot of seminars and cooperation with the Nordic Ukraine Forum. We see that as a very, very important step, and to uphold the discussions of continuous supporting Ukraine for winning their battle, because they are battling for us as well. So finally, with a warm heart and on behalf of the Swedish Atlantic Council, thank you again for welcoming us as a nation and us as an association. And I look forward to the oncoming speakers as well. Thank you very much, dear.
Thank you, Annika, for your contribution. We expect the Atlantic Council of Sweden, yourself, and all you there, with all of us in the south, in the north, in the center of Europe, working together for our values. Now is the time to have our keynote speaker, the Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, Mrs. Marie-Doa Besson-Senot. Unless that you are friends, you speak English with us, et notre fois, on va parler français aussi. And when you finish, I understand that you are so kind to take 2 or 3 questions all together. And before you leave, I like to present why we have invited the former presidents of ATA. Each one has a unique history in NATO and in ATA. So thank you again, and we are ready to listen to you and to work with you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the questions. It's very nice to see friendly, I was going to say faces, but I see more lists of names. So dear President and dear all presidents of ATA associations and dear friends, I really want to thank you for putting up this event to celebrate the anniversary of our alliance. It was very natural for us at NATO to support these events, as the ADAs are most natural, I would say, and closest partners in civil society. And I take this opportunity to really thank you for all the work you're doing, supporting us in sharing NATO's messages and explaining NATO to each of your communities, your audiences. A couple of days ago, 10 days ago now, on the 4th of April, there was a very solemn celebration here at NATO HQ. You've probably seen videos and pictures of that event, but I want to share the atmosphere with you because I think it shows you what the tone is for the celebration. So it started with a commemoration of all NATO lives lost in the past 70 years, a very moving moment with a wreath being deposited on the stone offered by Denmark, right at the center of the 32 flags outside of the headquarters by Secretary General and by the Chief of the Military Committee. And then we had the treaty, the Washington Treaty, coming all the way from Washington for the first time in history. And Secretary General in his speech underlining the miracle and the uniqueness of the bond that brings our alliance together, so strong and yet so simple. And that was his main message, saying we have a treaty with only 14 principles. It is a values-based alliance, an alliance with a very simple pledge of solidarity and mutual protection, a very simple all for one for all principle. And there is indeed something very special about our transatlantic alliance being so enduring, so strong, with such simple and clear foundations. And the third highlight of that ceremony was foreign ministers, because they were here for the foreign ministerial, and foreign ministers from allied nations celebrating important accession anniversaries, so 25th, 20th, and 15th, being given a couple of minutes each to encapsulate in their own words what NATO has changed for their country. And really listening to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia explain in a very sobering matter that joining NATO had been a matter of life and death for their nation as a sovereign and independent nation, but then also Poland, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Romania, and so many other allies with an anniversary expressing their gratitude for having been formally rooted in the Euro-Atlantic family in a values-based alliance, promoting democracy, rule of law, individual freedoms, and of course, ensuring the protection of their people was really a very, very moving moment. So indeed, over the last 70 years, the Atlantic Treaty Association has been integral to building and maintaining support for NATO among the people we serve and to strengthening the bond that is the foundation of the transatlantic alliance. So congratulations on also your own anniversary, your 70th anniversary, and we really look forward to working with you for many decades to come. So as you know, 2024 is a very important year for NATO and for all of us. It's an important year for the security of the 1 billion people who live in NATO member countries. We're in the spotlight as we mark our 75th anniversary. It's a milestone that gives us an opening to reflect on successes and tell a NATO story to broader audiences about how 12 nations, fresh from the destruction of losses of World War II, joined together, pledged to defend each other and preserve what they fought for during the war. So through many challenges, we did succeed in the core task of defending our sovereignty, our freedoms, our ways of life, so much so that over time, an additional 20 nations chose to join the alliance, making us the most powerful alliance in history. And so I was very happy to hear our Swedish ATA colleague, because it means a lot to us, and the relevance of NATO through your own words, I think is best expressed. So this year is very important for us because of the anniversary, but also because we are right now in the midst of the most significant security crisis since World War II, caused by Russia's murderous war in Ukraine. And only last weekend, we have seen how Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, this alignment between those nations happening, and an increased alignment is really challenging our interest, our security, our values. And this is happening through a conventional war, but also through a war that has an impact on food security, but also cyber activities, malicious cyber activities, and a lot of disinformation. And I think this point is really important to us all. It is a challenge that we share, you and us here at NATO, because we know that our adversaries, and we know that Russia is investing as much in the battle of narratives as they are investing in conventional warfare, in military equipment. And that alone really invests us with a very, very strong mission to actually spread the word, relentlessly explain what we stand for, what we are doing, and how we are contributing to making the world a safer place, not preparing for war, but preserving peace and preventing conflict. And I really thank you for all the good work you're doing, because I think our work together is now more vital than ever. Which is why we're very happy this year to support 11 projects with our grants from all across the Alliance. There are some good news. The good news is that we're stronger than ever. The good news are that allies are making more and more commitments and investments to ensure that we remain ready to defend every inch of NATO territory. And thank you to our Swedish colleague for mentioning all the good work that was being done bilaterally with Ukraine. And indeed, Ukraine is exceedingly central to what we're doing, simply because much, and most of the disinformation we see worldwide is aimed at undermining our support to Ukraine. And as we speak, one of the other reassuring element about this year, which makes it a very special year, is that NATO is engaged in the largest military exercise ever conducted since the Cold War. You've heard about it, Steadfast Defender. It began in January in North America. It will run through May across Europe with all components, land, sea, air, cyber, and space, and 90,000 troops all taking part from all NATO members, 32 members. It is a very major demonstration of our readiness. It shows how we've transformed in the past years to be fully interoperable. It shows our capabilities. It shows the amount of our investments in this interoperability and in the planning, which has been taking place in the past 2 years. This year is also important because of the summit, which is taking place in July. Indeed, all eyes will be on Washington, D.C. as our leaders gather for a historic summit. They will emphasize our unity. They will emphasize our progress in strengthening our defense and deterrence capabilities. They will be emphasizing the increased European investment in the Euro-Atlantic security, our adaptation to face modern threats, and our clear security interest in continuing support to Ukraine. So we will be using this momentum to shape the narrative and make sure that the people we serve are getting reassuring, accurate, credible information about what we are doing. Indeed, in such an alliance of democracies, our strength is really our cooperation. We work in a different manner than our adversaries. Our adversaries are powerful in the information sphere space because they use proxies, because they pay people and they use inauthentic communication means, bots, to promote narratives. We don't do this because we're an alliance of democracies. So ultimately, our biggest strength and our main answer to those practices, which we will not stoop down to, is really our coordination. So working very, very strongly together. So we are fortunate that alliance-wide, we enjoy a very high level of support from the citizens we represent, and the latest polls really show that. And this is in part thanks to our civil society partners like you, like the ATA. It is extremely important what you're doing. So we know that if a vote were held today, an overwhelming majority of citizens across allied countries would vote in favor of NATO. NATO citizens continue to express strong solidarity with the brave Ukrainians. However, our opinion polls also show that these statements really differ from different age groups, so we cannot take the support for granted. There is an increased political polarization in many parts of the alliance. Audiences are fragmented. Our adversaries are relying on this fragmentation and amplifying it. They are waging this relentless disinformation war, attacks, campaigns about NATO throughout the world, aiming at undermining support to Ukraine, weakening our own unity, and reducing public support to NATO and to Ukraine. So in this very competitive information environment, it is absolutely vital that we work with networks of like-minded partners, and you are the very, very first one, the most natural, the closest ones. And we really rely on your ability to, in turn, work with your business communities, academia, your own civil societies in the different chapters to support us. Because your voices can reach audiences that we cannot, and we need each one of your voices in each one of your languages to reach the vastest amount of people. And we know that youth in particular is very, very important. So thank you for your help. We really need it. And I hope you've already seen how outreach was a main priority for this year in our communications. Thank you for all the events that you're putting up, and we've seen many of them already. They really help us in advancing discussions about NATO and its role. So maybe very practically, what can you do to support us? Well, please continue to talk about the importance of NATO to your networks, keep organizing discussion and events, and think about new audiences that you could reach out to, and happy to discuss this with you and help you reach them. We are very happy to support those 11 grants this year. Please do communicate on the events that are being hosted, and we're very happy to amplify this so that you're not only doing, but also telling the story about your doing that. We really look forward to seeing all the energy that you put behind these projects, and we're always very happy to see the story online. What you can do also is help us share the digital content that we have prepared around the 75th anniversary. So we have a big landing page, which has been entirely revamped for the anniversary, with new resources being posted on a regular manner. We have a new podcast on NATO history, and it will have 10 episodes this year. We have specific animations, videos, graphics, NATO explainers, and we are working on different languages. And what you can do also, more specifically on youth, is encourage attendance at events and challenges, which we are organizing specifically for the youth. So the next NATO Youth Summit will be taking place next month on May the 13th. So please promote it so that your friends, your communities can register online. And the last thing you can do is maybe organize watch parties. We would very much welcome that. There are different resources on the website to help you organize that, and happy to provide guidance with you if there's an appetite for this. So I'll just stop here, and very happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Assistant Secretary General, for your contribution. And thank you very much for the trust that you offer to us to work together and continue the 70 years cooperation with NATO before be public diplomacy, when it was the information and press and so on. Before I ask some of our friends to have some question, and because I know that you will stay 10 minutes, 12 minutes more with us, I'd like to present why we have today the former presidents, and after we go to the young generation. Because we have unique personalities as presidents the last year. I start by Robert Hunter. He was ambassador of the United States during the first enlargement of NATO. I can say that Robert Hunter, with Secretary Albright and the Clinton administration, was the pioneers of the enlargement of NATO as we are together. The second person that unfortunately is not with us is the German Karl Lammers. Karl Lammers, a long-time member of the parliament in Berlin, of the German parliament, he has two hats to unify, and this is unique until now. He was president of the North Atlantic Assembly, the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, and at the same time, president of the Atlantic Treaty Association. What means that? Means that parliamentarians with the voice of parliamentarians, he unified the voice of parliamentarians in or on or not in for NATO with the will of the citizen society. Next president was Fabrizio Luccioli, the Italian professor, who has bring the Mediterranean dimension in our Atlantic Treaty Association. And some of us, we remember very well the assembly, the General Assembly, he has organized during his presidency in Palais d'Egmont in Brussels, in which the personalities from Mediterranean countries were much more than the personalities from Europe and United States. And Fabrizio continued his job, his involvement with the Mediterranean countries. Last but not least was my colleague, James Townsend. We have started 5 years ago with James Townsend, and with the former bureau. I see in the screen Alex Serban. I can see Monica Bekovic as Secretary General, Krista Mulenok. We have paved the way for a new Atlantic Treaty Association. We have met every 2 weeks, every Thursday of 2 weeks. We have met discussing and see how we can present a new Atlantic Treaty. And he has paved the way for the new Atlantic Treaty Association and paved the way for a new constitution that we have now. By the other hand, we have another personality from the partner countries. We have Dr. Fazla Bent, our vice president. He is from Austria. He was the longest Minister of Defense in all Europe, 10 years Minister of Defense and Speaker in the Austrian Parliament. But we have another person who himself alone is a history. Solomon Passy. Everybody knows Solomon Passy. He started in 91. When he comes in 88, he explained to me, I cannot understand 40 reasons that the Atlantic Council, the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria must be member of the Atlantic Treaty Association. In this time, the first member, associate member. He became the first vice president in the Atlantic Treaty Association. He has established and he has organized the General Assembly, the first one in Sofia, with the presence of 100 personalities, including the first time an Israeli president, and of course, Lech Walesa. Solomon Passy was not only the president of the Atlantic Council, he succeeded to be elected member of parliament and be appointed by the king, Simeon government as Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was the person who put his signature to be Bulgaria, this is why he's unique, member of NATO, a member of European Union. And everybody maybe remember how sensitive he was. My eyes is against sensitive when he raised himself the flag of Bulgaria in NATO. This is the persons of the past and continue together. But we have two persons to symbolize youth of the past and youth of today. Many years ago, it was a section of the Atlantic Treaty Association, the Association of Young Political Leaders, politicians, young person until 35 years old, appointed or elected. They have been together to work for the values of Atlantism. And Mr. Philippe Zevret from Montreal, he's a Canadian, now he's a consultant. He was the president of the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders during the big, let's say, the big expansion of NATO. And at least we have our young mademoiselle, lady, Miss Céline Guilmaz, who is now the president of the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. So now I take two questions. I like to start, if it's possible, by a question of a young person, because of course we give, somebody say that there is not presence. We have the past and we have the future. The presence is only 1 minute, 1 second. So I see that Georgia Di Stefano, a member of the board of the new Atlantic ATA, like to have a question. And after one other person from the senior, of the audience of the senior can put a question. So we take two questions and you reply, and after which you are free to continue your commitment. So Georgia.
Hello, dear Assistant Secretary General. It's a pleasure being here. And I am the Vice President for the Communication at IATA International. So my question is, how can we, right now in this important year, improve communication among the youth and keep spreading NATO's message in terms of, being the more, how can we give specific message and, yes, portray the true NATO message to the youth?
Okay, is anybody other that like to put a question? I prefer to be an individual and person that I think that let's give the floor Alex, if it's somebody other that knew, because we, the members of the board, we can have the possibility. If not, I don't see any other.
I have a question, Theo. I have a question.
Is who?
Solomon.
Okay, first show very briefly, Alex, and after you. Alex, very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Assistant Secretary General, at the NATO summit in July, what can we expect to see and to hear from NATO partner countries in Asia Pacific? And I also want to thank PDD very much for helping the ATA reach out to NGOs and to think tanks in Japan and South Korea this week. Thank you very much for that support. But what can we expect to see from the partner countries at the summit in July?
I like to inform the Assistant Secretary General that we in ATA, we start relation with the Indo-Pacific, and Mr. Serban going there has already go to Japan and South Korea to start working with you. And we thank you, Carmen Romero, and yourself of the support given to our member of the board. So, Solomon.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you very much for initiating this meeting. This is really a very, very important meeting, and it was under your leadership. Assistant Secretary General, thank you also for accepting this meeting. We have 70 years ATA, 75 years NATO. PDD has always been the bond between the two of them. My question is the following. Are you ready to pass a message to be embedded in the final document of the Washington summit? And the message is the following. I would be very happy to see in the final document of the Washington summit that we are going to have Article 5 permanently invoked vis-a-vis propaganda. Article 5 says that armed attack against one is attack against everybody, but it doesn't specify what does it mean, arms. And words are much more heavy and dangerous arms than the weapons and the bullets. So I very much believe that if we have this in the final communique of the expected Washington summit, this will help the work of all of us to fight the propaganda. I spent half of my life during the Cold War under communism and half of my life with ATA and the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria and NATO. And I can assure you that the propaganda that we envisage today is much harder than the propaganda that we had during the Cold War. During the Cold War, the propaganda was homemade, while today it is imported and in industrial quality, made in the Kremlin, made in China, and made within the axis of evil. This is my question. Will you support such a move to have such a text in the final document?
So, Ms. Besancenot, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for these three questions, and I will probably begin with the third one because the other two are linked. Thank you so much, Solomon Pesci, for being so committed to this topic of propaganda, whether you call it disinformation, and now we call it increasingly FEMI, which is what it is, which is foreign information manipulation and interference. I've been there 8 months now, and I've made it my priority from day one because I completely agree with you that information, words are being weaponized in a way that means that we cannot communicate in a very top-down institutional way as if this propaganda weren't happening, weren't already reaching our audiences before we reach out to them. So indeed, I did just like you. I read the latest statements in Vilnius by the Allies, which is paragraph 64, on hybrid threats and more specifically disinformation and misinformation. You're right. There is a mention of Article 5. It is an indirect mention because it says we as allies recognize that these threats can reach the level of gravity of an armed conflict, which in turn would justify that we trigger Article 5. And then there is a certain number of solutions provided, which is basically anticipation, coordination. There's a recognition that this fight cannot be fought alone by one ally, and that it is a legitimate topic for NATO to be involved in. And then the last, the conclusion to the paragraph is the ultimate decision to attribute an attack in the information space relies with the nations. So nations do that work, identifying an attack on their own territory, their own linguistic area, targeting their own audiences, and then NATO can amplify the message once it's been called out by one or several nations. So this is where we are. And I agree with you. I think this is a very good and strong threat or risk assessment, if you will, but I think we can go further in the response, and this is really what we've been working on. And what I can share with you is that in the past 8 months, I've had several opportunities to bring the topic to the North Atlantic Council, to the ambassadors. The level of awareness is really high. The idea, as you said, that propaganda is a national security issue for every one of us and not just a comms matter, but really national security issue is really there. So that's very positive. Now, what I am suggesting is threefold, and indeed, so this is still a work in progress. I'm working within the NATO frameworks of the different existing committees to see what kind of deliverable can be, well, can actually go all the way to Washington and be agreed by the allies. But my current proposals is around three things. One, agreeing a common methodology to help all allies share the disinformation practices, campaigns, attacks that they're witnessing in their own territory. We are getting such information on a volunteer basis from nations who have invested in the tools and have the political will to call them out. And we have organized so that's my second point, a coordination mechanism, and call it what you will. I think there are two different mechanisms. One is just an information sharing mechanism, and the second one is really an alert mechanism. So this is already happening. It's happening with nations who have volunteered, and now we're really extending this and operationalizing this to all allied nations, which means that we have contact points in the capitals of experts who can be sitting in the MFAs, in the MODs, or in standalone agencies like we have in Sweden or in France. Anyone who is actually dedicated to this and who can work with us both ways, alerting NATO and the other allies on campaigns which are hitting them, but can also be hitting the others, and also the other way around, partners in the nations who can be activated if we say we see this risk of having this narrative grow before the summit and misrepresenting what the summit is about, so that they can also tell the story in a truthful way to their own audiences, their national audiences, in a very operational way. So this is what I can promise. This is what we're really working on. I cannot promise what kind of language the allies will agree. It will be for them to keep debating. What I can say, however, is that there is an acute awareness here in the Council that this is a collective defense issue. It's a national security issue. It's a resilience issue, and it's also a values issue, because this is about democratic values. So this I can assure you. On youth, so I think the question on youth, and thank you for on youth and communication, thank you for being so committed. I think part of the answer is related to that. You probably know best how to tell the story in a simple way. And because disinformation is so strong, we're also learning more different ways of communicating, which is probably less institutional, less nuanced, and more basic. And sometimes it seems to us, you know, we're telling the story in a way that's really basic, almost primitive, but it seems to us, if we need to explain the legitimacy of what we're doing, if we need to add more transparency, explain what we're doing, what we're not doing, what NATO is not, we need to be doing these things. And also working with friends, with, let's say, relays, spokespeople who are new to us. So we're doing a lot of work with influencers. Influencers can come from all walks of life. If you do have your own influencers that you're working with, or on the contrary, if you would like to be working with some influencers who are already working with us at NATO, very happy to share those with you. We are building this community right now. In the long run, we want to call them NATO champions. We want them to stay close to us in the long run. And then I would say just feel free to experiment different contents, but also I hope that you feel that you can tap into our content. I mean, if you don't feel that you have enough content to tap into, I'm very happy to work with you specifically with the ATAs, because we do have, you know, like NATO one-on-one videos. We do have podcasts. We do have a whole variety of content, which is really, really aimed at younger audiences. So happy to work with you on that. And maybe the last question on the IP4, on the partners, what can we expect? Well, beyond an invitation, I do not know, but Secretary General has repeated that the invitation would be extended to them to be part of the meeting. All the NATO divisions are actually working on deliverables. What is it we want to prioritize with each of those countries? With some of them, we're already working very closely on what I know best, which is Stratcom. So I think this you can expect. And then I know there are discussions going on around solidarity around Ukraine, because indeed we have reached a moment where we do need all democracies, wherever they are in the Euro-Atlantic area or beyond, to be part of this worldwide support that we want to provide to Ukraine. So this is, I think, as far as I can go on the IP4. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Madame Besancenot. Thank you very much to be with us. I like to say that our member of the board, Anne van Zoest, she will close the session, and we will send to you all the discussion and the results. I like to take the opportunity to thank you again for our meeting we have 1 month ago in Brussels together. We continue that with the board very soon. And of course, I like to say to the public, because, you know, and only the administration of ATA know that through the contribution of public diplomacy, we will organize in person, and we wait you in person in the mid of October, our flagship event or General Assembly, let's say, probably in Athens. And I would like to welcome as President of ATA and as President of the local national association. So thank you very much. You can continue your engagement. We wish you the best in your new post, because it's the first time that you are in the public with ourselves, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Not so new anymore. It's 8 months now, but yeah, no, it's a great pleasure to be working with you, and I think it's a very special year to be joining NATO and also to be working with the ATA. So very much looking forward to more concrete and regular touch points with you. So, and congratulations on this event.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous. Au revoir.
Au revoir. So let's continue our event tonight with the fourth one is not possible to come, Vice President. As I have say 5 minutes ago, everybody is unique. We start by Robert Hunter. He was the ambassador of United States when start the thinking of Clinton administration of the expansion of NATO. Robert, thank you very much that you are with us. Thank you very much that you will be again with us. And we wait you not only for your speech tonight, but to work with us in the time that you have and the time that to help us, to advise us in the new path. So, Robert, you have the floor.
Well, Theo, to begin with, I don't know whether you can see and hear me. If you can see me, let me know. If you can hear me, let me know, okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because modern technology, my computer's not working. It's an honor to be with you under your leadership once again, Theo, and to be with so many good friends from different countries who have done so much in the past. I sort of want to ask Solomon if he still has his Robbie, and whatever happened to the experiment you put on the moon. Say, in terms of creativity. There are a lot of extraordinary people here I've had a chance to work with over the years who made ATA what it is. And thanks also to the Assistant Secretary General. Listening to her, I have full confidence in the future of NATO. Probably too late to make her the new Secretary General, but keep her in the wings. There also, I'm glad you mentioned the youth ATA, younger people, because that's what it's all about. It's not about those of us who tried and sometimes succeeded to do things in the past, but it's the building for the future for NATO and other aspects of, if I can say, the broader transatlantic relationship. And so that is a great salute. And also, I hope, we heard the reassurance just now from the Assistant Secretary General. I hope that there is a full understanding at NATO headquarters of the critical importance of ATA. In fact, I would argue it is more important now than it has ever been. There's a lot of very positive things being said about what's going on at NATO, but there are a lot of difficulties as well, including in holding all of the now 32 countries together in doing what needs to be done with Ukraine. My country, unfortunately, has been, for reasons we all know within the United States Congress, has been lagging behind in helping Ukraine. And clearly, enabling Ukraine to prosecute this war effectively is going to be the most important test of NATO at this point. And ATA is in a position in the individual countries to work on members of parliament, if also on governments, to make sure the strength, the solidarity, sense of purpose goes forward. Now, you asked about the early days. Some of us were fortunate to be involved in the remaking of NATO, beginning with the, of course, it began with the Bush administration, and then it went with the. I see the video is not working. So we'll have to talk to Microsoft about that. And then with the Clinton administration, which had a number of parts. Number one, the continued commitment of the United States to European security. Number two, the preservation of the institutions, where the integrated military command system has no rival in all of history. And then we understood not only the need to strengthen what we classic NATO allies did, but to reach out to the East, partnership for peace, and then a certain amount of enlargement. Then to try, but unfortunately it failed, to build some security framework in which Russia would have a part and would choose to have a part. Mr. Putin has clearly said thanks, but no thanks. And then right now, a critical point for Ukraine. I have to say right at the start, I do not see a consensus of 32 countries now or maybe ever that's going to be willing to have Ukraine in NATO. But that's not going to be necessary in my judgment if we do the things that help the Ukrainians continue to fight with what they're doing in order to preserve the integrity of their nation. Now, one of the things, the extraordinary things that are being done now at NATO to build for the future, building on Wales declaration, building on what happened in Brussels most recently, and it's going to be done at NATO this summer. I hope we do not, however, allow ourselves, no matter what Mr. Putin does, to drift into a new Cold War with all of its risks, its permanency, and its high costs. I don't know whether the Russians, whether Mr. Putin or anybody else, is ever going to be willing to consult seriously and to look for a different approach to the one it's taking. But I think we need to be open to that and to go back to the origin of NATO, which is we are not an aggressive alliance. We want to be inclusive. We have democratic principles at our heart, though even at the beginning that was not always true, if we think about Portugal. And then to try to understand the fundamental nature of transatlantic cooperation, unity, NATO, and its ancillary institutions, of which ATA is the most important, to the overall structure of international relations. What is happening today in the Middle East, the most serious crisis for some decades, I would argue, will only be successful if we in the transatlantic world are also working closer together, and if NATO maintains its solidarity and everything. Because as the countries involved in the Middle East trying to make things work together, they have to understand that a strong NATO, a vigorous NATO, a NATO with fundamental political support by every member country is going to be not just useful, but vital. So again, President Georgiou and everybody else is here, and everybody else against across the wide world of ATA, well done, and let's go collectively into a very effective, useful, and successful future. Theo, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Bob.
Ambassador Hunter. Let's proceed now to the next president, who is Fabrizio Luccioli, because as I have said, Karl Lammers, the last moment, was unable to be with us. So Fabrizio, you have the floor. as I have when I introduce you to the Secretary General, to the Assistant Secretary General, you bring during your tenure as President the Mediterranean dimension, not only, but the Mediterranean dimension to ATA. And you continue work with Mediterranean and of course with all the other. So you have the floor, Fabrizio. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me because I am with my mobile. And actually, in this very moment, I am hosted in Bulgaria, in Sofia. It was expected to stay here just a few hours, but thanks for you, I wasted my flight ticket and I was taking another ticket for tomorrow early morning. But I am here because of a meeting of a Crimea platform, and so we are dealing with Ukraine. But anyway, I want to really to say thank you for putting together all these friends and all together to reconnect even more effectively in order to look to the future on occasion of this celebration of the 70th anniversary of ATA and of course of the 75th anniversary of the Alliance. And let me say that I'm really proud to take part in this initiative because I'm proud to represent a country that was a founding member of the Alliance, a founding member of ATA, a founding member of IATA, and probably I suppose that we have also the record of the largest number of General Assembly organized, because 4 in Italy and 1 in Brussels. I don't know if there are other associations that made 5 General Assemblies. But anyway, yes, you're right. We are quite much engaged in the Mediterranean, in what we call the so-called enlarged Mediterranean, because we have a perspective that the basin is just the center of something that is going to be projected with the effect and the impact of what is happening in the Indo-Pacific, in the Atlantic, or from the Balkans, or from the Black Sea, and so on. So at the same time, let me say that we are going, I will go quickly back to Italy because we are engaged with a very relevant visit of the whole North Atlantic Council. All the 32 ambassadors are in Italy in this very moment, landed in Rome by helicopter from our Italian air carrier, Cavour. And so we have some meetings also tomorrow and the day after tomorrow in the Parliament. In a closed-door meeting, I will have the honor, together with the President of the Italian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to address the North Atlantic Council. And if you, with your permission, of course, I will talk about the role of ATA and how we need to enhance the role of ATA, particularly at this very stage of this dramatic situation of the changing international security scenario. Because let me say provocatively that if NATO officially is not at war, actually ATA is at war. All of you were speaking and talking about the disinformation and the propaganda and the so-called hybrid warfare. And ATA is boots on the ground in this field of disinformation and propaganda. So when we are celebrating an anniversary like the 70th anniversary, this means that, of course, we have to take the lesson learned and the successes and the experience of the past, but this in order to act much more effectively against and to push back this disinformation and propaganda. And here, I regret that the Assistant Secretary General was not able to follow us even more, because in my opinion, we need to enhance the kind of relationship between ATA and the Public Diplomacy Division, to enhance the quality of the relations, I mean, in terms of strategic communication, much more coherent, in a kind of osmosis process between Brussels and the apical positions of ATA, and then from the ATA headquarters down to all the national associations, in order to have a coherent communication and narrative, and to lead this narrative and not to counter and to react all the time. So in Italy, we are facing a strong propaganda and disinformation. That's why we are working much more on the university. We have a relationship with 13 universities in Italy, and also with networks of journalists, and so with target groups like this. And we are doing this also thanks to some grants that are arriving from the NATO Public Diplomacy Division. I hope to get this confirmation. We are still yet not arrived, but we are going to run the NATO simulations. That was the NATO simulations that also we initiate at the level of the Atlantic Treaty Association when I was president. So regarding the South, in a few weeks, we are going to host in Italy, actually this is the Italian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, is going to host in Italy the special group of Mediterranean. That means a group of parliamentarians from the NATO Parliamentary Assembly that are focused particularly on the issues of the Mediterranean, because we have to take into consideration that anyway, as we see, the conflict and instability in the South are originating and interconnected, of course, with this new band that we call the so-called CRIC, I mean China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So everything is interconnected. We need to have a much more coherent and effective action on this. And so in 3 weeks, the special group of Mediterranean will be in Rome, and we will address cooperative security programs in which for sure ATA can play a major role. Some programs we already established with Israel, that is a member, in our associations, but contacts already well established since many years. So we have with Jordan, with Morocco, and other countries of the region. But let me say from Sofia here that we don't have to neglect what is happening in the Western Balkans, and particularly in countries like Serbia, like in Bosnia. We need to keep an eye and to revitalize the programs and the cooperation on that area. And in this respect, we are cooperating with the authorities on Serbia recently, and we are working hard also there to counter disinformation and to see which role ATA can play also there. And having said that, I will start from what Solomon Passy was saying, and regarding the final declaration of the Washington summit. And I think that somebody mentioned, you, President Georgiou, you was mentioning the report of the Committee of Three that at that time in 1956 was chaired and led by the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gaetano Martino. And actually, ATA is mentioned there in that report. Is mentioned in that report, particularly the programs on education that ATA was carrying out and the national committees and councils was carrying out. And I think that now it's the time also to have on the final declaration in Washington also one line appreciating the role that for 70 years ATA was doing. And this is something that was happening last time during my tenure as president during the 2016 at the Warsaw Summit. We got already this kind of appreciation. So thank you very much, President Georgiou, for this opportunity once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruccioli. Thank you, Fabrizio. Of course, it's in our plan, and you know, because all the presidents, they have a seat in the committee of wise men, wise committee, we can say, patrons committee, for working for the education, and we collect as ATA leadership what happens in different countries, and we can spread this information to other countries too. And of course, for the final communique, we work hard. We need to work hard with our ambassadors in NATO to come again, to be again shown in the final communique, the appreciation not only for the North Atlantic Assembly, but for the Parliamentary Assembly for the Atlantic Treaty Association. Now, we come in a colleague that without tithe, approximately 5 years, we have met, Jim, I think that we have met 60 or 70 times, because this means if we count every 2 weeks, thinking and discussing 1 hour every Thursday about Atlantic Treaty Association with your bureau, your former board, and you have paved the way for a new Atlantic Treaty Association. For those that are not very familiar, Mr. James Townsend was the Assistant Deputy Secretary for Defense in Pentagon, and he has given a lot of his time for ATA. You have the floor, Jim.
Oh, thank you, Theo. Hello to everyone and greetings from the Atlantic Council of the United States, and congratulations to everyone on the 70th anniversary that we're celebrating now. I think the only thing I would add, Theo, is that I think I've always felt that if we didn't already have an ATA today, we'd be organizing one. PDD, instead of celebrating our 70th, it would be trying to gather everyone to develop an ATA, because they really need it. The Alliance needs it. And I think that's what the only point I want to make is, building on what's been said before, is that the ATA needs to get operational now with PDD. You know, that was our plan all along, was to get us to a point with the board that we would have a new relationship with PDD, where they would contribute to us and we would be more operational with them in terms of trying to push back on Russian propaganda and all that we've been talking about. And so I think in the days to come, as we look at the new ATA, the board that we have, the very strong, good, diverse board of very energetic people, that we try to make ourselves more operational and to be the right arm of PDD working in the grassroots. And I think PDD can do more to help us, and vice versa. I think it's a matter of sitting down with them and trying to work out, as part of the strategic plan that I'm sure the board is working on, that the strategic plan needs to have this as a hallmark of their work, is this new relationship with PDD, a new financial relationship with PDD, and in this time of war in Europe, that PDD, that the ATA becomes an operational adjunct the ATA becomes an operational adjunct to PDD, so that we can work at the grassroots and try to turn around this Russian disinformation. So with that, I would just say that I look forward to seeing you all at the Washington Summit. There's a lot of work going on right now on the side events, and I hope that we can see everyone there. And I hope that the challenge that the board has before it can be met, and that this time next year we can gather and we'll hear all the good things that both organizations are doing together. Thanks, Theo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Townsend. Before going to Solomon Passy, I like to ask one personality from the partner country. Austria play a very big role in Europe and in NATO. And Dr. Fazlabend, with the experience that he has, 10 years member of 10 years Minister of Defense of his country and Speaker too. He's now our Vice President. He was the Vice President during the transition board, the transition period. And I think that he has a long to contribute with us with the relations of European Union and NATO. So Werner, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Theo. I hope everybody can hear me, and a special welcome and greetings also to all our former presidents, from Bob Hunter to Fabrizio and to Jim Townsend. It's a pleasure to see you again and to meet, of course, with the whole board. I just would like to say a few words about our agenda. Why NATO? Why is it so important? And I want maybe to add, you know, that I was born and brought up very close to the so-called Iron Curtain in the past, living only 200 meters away from the Austro-Czechoslovakian border then. And I experienced in my childhood and youth so many occasions, so many really shocking experiences I had from the other side, that you really can be sure that this was not only just some experience, but something that went right into my heart. And if we look back, we have to be aware, you know, in 1949, when NATO was founded, when you looked at the European atlas, if you looked at the geostrategic situation in Europe, you could see that there was only the very western part of the continent existing out of free and independent countries. And NATO certainly had the agenda to give stability and security to those countries, because of course there were plans from Moscow in order to reach even the Atlantic coast. And this also was, of course, in the interest of the Americans. The situation changed after the end of the Cold War. And for the first time, more than half a century, it was possible that the Central and Eastern European countries could reach the status of independence and freedom of their nations. And once again, it was NATO that had the task and the agenda to not only to provide stability and security, but also more or less to guarantee this process for getting freedom. And now we are in a new situation. After having sometimes believed that, okay, this bad situation was over, there was not very much danger anymore for most of the European countries, we have learned by the war in Ukraine that the situation is different. NATO is not a brain death organization, but everybody realized that it was immensely necessary to keep this organization and to have it in order to have a counterweight to any aggression. And what I see at the moment is, you know, that it is not only our task to do everything in order to help Ukraine to keep its independence, its freedom, its security, but of course, there are so many changes. We talked already about it, you know, the Sweden and Finland joining NATO and so on. We can look now at the map and we can see, you know, that more or less a new defense shield is or will be operating in the future, reaching from the North Cape to the Black Sea. But what will be necessary is not only that this group of countries like Finland and Sweden, the Baltic countries, Poland, Romania and Ukraine can defend themselves and can more or less guarantee their own freedom and security. But every defense shield, of course, needs a strong arm and a strong person behind it. And this is the function of NATO. It has such an imminent importance. I think I do not have to talk too much about it because it is so clear. But what I see is that beyond this question of freedom and security and independence for European countries, of course also freedom of navigation, freedom of information will be one of the most challenging agendas and tasks for the future. And this is why we will not only be restricted to our own countries and the immediate neighborhood, but far beyond, as Lucas said also, we will have to look at the Indo-Pacific space and so on. And insofar, I think, you know, that the agendas have changed and they will change also in the future. But this main challenge, just to secure freedom in a very broad and wide sense, this certainly will remain. And not only to secure it, but to do it commonly because only in common we will be able to secure it. And what I see is, that of course Europe will have to play a much bigger role in this context than it had in the past. And not only European countries just as single countries, but also together as European Union, together with our American friends, United States and Canada, and also partners around it. It's not a question, but if we want to secure our stability in the future, we have to be aware that, of course, America will have to concentrate much more at the Pacific Rim. This is the bigger new rivalry for the Americans, and it's one of the most important questions, of course, of global politics, and therefore we will have to do it. Okay, so in order to come to an end, I wanted to say that whether you are a member country or just a member of NATO Partnership of Peace, or just a country in the neighborhood that is more or less linked to the common fate we do have in Europe. It will be necessary to invest in our security and to do it in common, to cooperate to an extent that it's much, much stronger than it was in the past. The challenge will not become less, it will become bigger and more intense. And insofar, not only NATO will have a much bigger agenda in the future, but what I see also, our organization, the Atlantic Treaty Association, certainly will have a very big task in order to do at least part of the soft power, in order to shape the narratives, in order to explain people, the civil society, why NATO is important and will be important in the future. And insofar, I want to thank you also for listening to my words, and let us work together. I'm looking forward in a very positive sense, because I think, that people have realized how necessary it is to stick together. Thank you very much for listening to my words. And thank you very much also for this excellent cooperation I experienced in the last years.
Thank you very much, Werner. Thank you, Dr. Faslabend, for your wise words, for your wise ideas, for your wise commitment. I keep invest more to security. Many things we can keep, but this is very important. Now we come to one person who alone is a history. He started with Atlantic Club of Bulgaria. When he was parliamentarian, he risked his life to say in the parliament that we need to join NATO, we in Bulgaria. He succeeded to organize one of the most important Atlantic association and clubs, not only in partnership countries, but everywhere. And not only that, if you visit the new headquarters of NATO, you see an old car, Trabant, who is a replica of the car that exists in the ministry, outside of the ministry, if I remember well, of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. And is the car when Dr. Solomon Pasi, as president of the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria, put inside the car, the smallest car, the Manfred Werner, the Secretary General of NATO, instead that his security has a lot of, discussion, but nobody can say no to Dr. Solomon. This is why Solomon has continued in all his life. He raised with his hands the flag of Bulgaria to NATO and European Union, and now he come back to work with the citizen society. Solomon, you are an example for the youth. You are an example for all of us. You stay strong, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Theo. This is such a generous introduction. You made me, you humble me indeed a lot. Well, having said that, the first thing is that I'm so happy to be with so many old friends together today. We were together with many of you for 34 years now. And this is the history. This is the history that we keep a company, a crowd, a family for over than 34 years. And I'm very much impressed by the enthusiasm of Theo to once again run for president of the Atlantic Treaty Association. I remember that the first time when he became president of the Atlantic Treaty Association was here in Sofia in 1997, when he took the chairmanship from our great colleague Umit Haluk Bayulken from Turkey, and he passed the torch of the presidency to Theo. This itself was a history, because before that, the relations on the Balkans were such that it was not very common that first a Turk and then a Greek would become president of an ATA, but in Bulgaria sometimes miracles happen. So I was indeed very much impressed to see the enthusiasm of Theo to rejuvenate the Atlantic Treaty Association since 2024, and to lead all of us to the Washington Summit and beyond. I was very much satisfied to hear that Alex Sherban is taking responsibility for our relations with Asia Pacific. And we shall be very happy from here, from Bulgaria, to offer our modest experience with working with Japan, Korea, and even with Taiwan, with whom we have very intensive relations. Also, I wanted to say to Dr. Faslabend that and to everybody else, that we shouldn't treat the partner organizations as different organizations. They should be treated in exactly the same way in which we treat the members organization coming from NATO member states. We have only 4 EU member states which are not in NATO. These are Austria, Ireland, Cyprus, and Malta. And I don't think that, and it is the first time when we do not, each of these countries do not have a border with another EU member state which is not in NATO. So we're in unique geopolitical situation. But as far as I see, the gap between the European Union and NATO, because it was a gap 30 years ago, is not anymore a gap. After Finland and Sweden joined NATO, we become more and more the two sides of the same coin. And speaking of ATA as such, I think that our relevance and our importance is higher than ever before in the past 70 years. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I remember the propaganda during communism, which was homemade here in Sofia. But today, the propaganda which penetrates Bulgaria is 1,000 times higher than what I remember from the first half of my life. We have something like between 800 and 2,000 different penetrations from Russian propaganda, which come every day to Bulgaria. Between 800 and 2,000 daily. It requires a daily answer to daily brainwashing, and if they succeed, if this propaganda succeed, they will succeed to win the elections. And if they win the elections in Bulgaria and elsewhere in NATO, they don't need weapons. They don't need weapons if they put in the capitals governments which are applauding Putin. That's why our job is so important, and I would suggest that all of us unite behind what we discussed with the Assistant Secretary General to ask NATO to put in the final communique in the Washington summit that we need permanently evoke the Article 5 against propaganda. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the Athens summit of ATA. We shall be very happy, all of us, to assist Theo in his great undertaking. Let us meet happily in Athens.
Thank you, Solomon. I think that in Athens you play a role because you, as minister, George Papandreou, who was later Prime Minister, and Joanna, our Deputy Secretary General, and with the late Turk Minister, you have initiated the cooperation of 4, 2, and 2, and in the same time, you are the only ministers, the 4 of you, that you involve the Atlantic Treaty Association, the national associations, in there in the meeting and in the communique when finished. Now we go to, let's say, to section of the youth. Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders. It, some 30 years ago, was a strange name for me, but they invite me as a young politician to be there to observe American elections through the Atlantic Council of Young Political Leaders. We have invited and we start immediately relation with them. And we have continued a long time with cooperate with the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders. Some persons, they are not so young now, but we still, and they fight for the values of the Atlantism and for the values of democracy. So we have from the other side of the Atlantic, from Canada, from Montreal, Philippe Gevray. Of course, Philippe now is in business. He's a consultant. He leads a big consultancy company in Canada, but he's still with us. He stays with us and with the Atlantic Association of NATO in Canada with the President Robert Baines. So, Philippe, thank you very much that you come. Thank you, Agostina, another person from Bulgaria, former Vice Minister of Defense and collaborator of Solomon, who put us through, and I think that we stay together for a long time. Thank you very much, and you have Philippe, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's great to see you again. It's, as you mentioned, it's been a few decades. You had more hair, I had more hair, and the little hair we have left was actually dark. So I'm very happy to be here with the group, and I'm very happy to see some old faces. Theo talked about the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders. An organization which, and I'm not going to talk about all the people that are on the call right now, but just in the speakers that are here today. I first met Solomon through the AAYPL, you obviously, Theo, but also Fabrizio. So even out of the small group of speakers that we have today, a large amount of us have come out of that group. The Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders was a group that would bring together from NATO countries, young people that are involved in politics. So people that were young elected officials, as you were, Mr. President, people that were political staffers, chiefs of staffs, but also people that were heavily involved in political parties. In my case, I was, at the time when I was first invited to join AAYPL, I was the president of the Young Conservatives of Canada under Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. And it was a great formative time for a lot of us. As young people getting involved in politics, sometimes for a lot of us, it was our first really foray into international affairs and foreign affairs, with a lot of our work being done locally within our political parties, within our political formations. That was very much beneficial. So it was really formative years for a lot of these young people that, a few years down the road, became ministers, became prime ministers, became presidents. Solomon was one of those people that basically became a fantastic Minister of Foreign Affairs for his country. And all of this based on principles and values of the Atlantic Treaty Association. Relationships that were built there basically at 3 levels that really changed things. One, within nations, because our group was, although political, was multi-partisan. I don't want to say non-partisan, because we would bring people from different political parties within the various member countries and have these people and basically realize that there are shared values. No matter what your political differences were within your country, you had these shared values in terms of defense, in terms of democracy, in terms of human rights. So these would bring these people together within nations, within NATO countries, obviously based on the same. And as when I was there, basically with a mandate to go beyond NATO. When I was president in the early 90s, we were tasked to start promoting the values of the Atlantic Treaty Associations beyond the Iron Curtain, which we started doing. So I remember a lot of trips to, yes, Bulgaria, but also to Prague and Warsaw, and we remember including a lot of young political leaders from Sweden and Finland. So a lot of, it wasn't just beyond the Iron Curtain, it was also bringing people together and trying to get those groups to start working together and form associations in those countries. In some instances, it was easier than others. Bulgaria was with the leadership of Solomon and Augustina and others that were there at the time in the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria. It was I don't want to say easy, it was easier to get recognition. In other countries, when we first started going in, I'm thinking about Poland. I'm talking about my first trip to Warsaw, my first trips to Prague, where we would meet with different young people from different political parties who were basically at odds. You had ex-communists on one side, and you had people that fought for freedom and democracy on the other side, and trying to bring those people together under the guise of a common goal of building again trust and common values amongst that that go back to the treaty was not always easy. So one of the things with I like to say, and I won't be very long, but Theo, with all due respect, Mr. President, I know that the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders has a little bit died off over the last few years, and I would suggest that you and your new mandate, and I'm presuming you will be reelected. So, but that you try to deploy efforts to get this association going again. It was great help to a lot of people that were involved in politics, and when we talk about where decisions are made and where countries come together, having that common knowledge, having those links that go beyond our country are really, really the key. And one, I want to finish just by saying one thing to YATA. This is not, what I'm suggesting is not to replace YATA. It's a different group. It's a different subgroup of young people. And obviously it's to add and it's to complement the great work that they're already doing. So on that, Mr. President, thank you very much. And just maybe one last thing is that we are planning a reunion of AAYPL, not this summer, but at next year's the 2025 Atlantic Treaty Association meeting. And I know we've been in touch, and Agustina's talked to you about that. So hopefully we can see all of you with a broader group from ours older, but and maybe that could be a launch to build a new AAYPL.
Thank you very much, Philip. We look the reason that I have invited the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders is because it was my first approach, as I have said, with NATO and NATO Association and Atlantic Treaty. And I used to say all the time that that is important. Young politicians starting thinking and working together will do in countries a coalition of different political parties believe to the same values for the Atlantic and transatlantic links. So I can guarantee you that we work with my board hard to revive, and we are ready to cooperate with you for the reunion and see many familiar faces next year. So let's come to the youngest person of our meeting, who is Celine Gilmaz, a member of the youth of the Turkish youth component section of the Atlantic Council of Turkey, a legendary association in Turkey. Celine has been elected president a few months ago. So you have the floor, Celine.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Buonasera from Rome. Right now, I'm attending and representing the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association in the 75th anniversary celebrations of Italy. And I would like to start by saying that we should be thankful to ATA and its vision from the past, because long before most of the associations, other associations understood the importance of the youth, ATA with its vision established us in 1996. At the moment, I'm very proud to say that we have a huge group of people extremely enthusiastic to contribute to transatlantic values and affairs. And to me, it is personally important and flattering that I am the president of this organization at the 70th years of ATA and 75th anniversary of NATO. I would like to keep it short. I would like to emphasize one thing that I'm really proud of, which is that not only from our members at IATA or ATA, but also there are different countries that openly shows us the different people from different parts of the world expressing their willingness to contribute to NATO values in their countries. So what I can tell you for sure is that the younger generation understands the importance of ATA, understands the importance of NATO, and I can guarantee you that the future of this alliance is in safe hands. Mr. President, I would like to thank you because it's my second term as the president of IATA. At my first term, my president was Mr. James Townsend, and then I started working with Mr. Yorkio. For me, it was very great to work under different leaderships, under supervisions, because definitely it gives us a great chance to have different approaches, different mentalities. And I would like to emphasize one thing, which is we are your part. We need your assistance, we need your advices, we need your support to how to handle, how to achieve the things that we are planning. So please do not forget your local chapters. Please remember that there are so many young people begging for the opportunity to contribute this association. And we are very willing and happy to say that IATA International, the youth branch of the ATA, is happy to assist anything you need. So count on us. Let's keep in touch and let's be sure that this organization is growing even bigger. Lastly, I would like to say that as IATA, we focus on strategic communications more than ever. So please follow our social media accounts because we have so many different voices, different people in their own languages, giving messages to the countries of our network and from different countries. So please remember that we are part of yours and we are proud for that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Celine. There's no necessity to say to count for you because we count for the young, for the children of ourselves. You are a component of the Atlantic Treaty Association. You are not international IATA, you are the youth of Atlantic Treaty Association. The other are the section of any association, you know, in Turkey, the youth of the Atlantic Council of Turkey, in Italy, the youth of Comitato Atlantico, and so on. So thank you, and we work together as we have worked in the past, and we enhance the working together. It depends how many we can have to help initiatives by youth, but this is a question of all of us, in question to PDD and to our individual, if exists, sponsors. Before coming to the last, to the lady who is young too, but is a very experienced diplomat, and comes from an association that is really an example in our Atlantic Treaty. I like to ask one or two persons if they like for 2 minutes each, because we are already in 1 hour and 45 minutes, if they like to say something, but only 2 minutes each, member of the board or other participants in the screen. Does anybody like to say something? Raise your hand. Let me see if I don't see anybody. There are some writing questions. One very important. We have not, the Secretary General, the Assistant Secretary General has not the possibility to reply. One very important question, of course, is question about cooperation with the youth, and one is about climate. We are in a very big danger with change of climate. I can say to you that today, in April 15, first time in my life, we stay inside in the room in Athens, and we have opened the air condition. The temperature outside is 30 degrees, something unusual in the time. So there is climate change is a big danger for all of us and for NATO, for the countries of NATO, for the people of NATO. So I don't think that it's anybody that like to say something. I don't think that is so. Anne, you come from a country in which 54, and we have the archives in ATA offices in Brussels. They met to establish the Atlantic Treaty Association. They have before established an association in Netherlands, an association in France, in UK, in United States, and in Italy. And they continue, and they decide to have a federation in this time for the Atlantic, with the name Atlantic Treaty Association. So thank you that you are with us. You have the floor for closing remarks and some, ideas, because you represent not only the board, but the new wind, the new blood in the Atlantic Treaty Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Theo, for your kind words, and what a pleasure to be with you today in this important company of known faces, but also new faces within the Atlantic Treaty Association's community. A real honor to be able to deliver the closing remarks live from The Hague. I'm afraid you don't see much of the city as you look at me, but really I am here close to the Peace Palace, close to the sea, from The Hague, where the Atlantic Treaty Association was founded in 1954. 1954, a year that was full of energy and thinking about reconstruction after the Second World War, striving for peace, striving for freedom, the time of the Marshall Plan, the time of increasingly close ties between Europe and the United States. So hard and soft power going hand in hand, and the Atlantic Treaty Association was definitely part of that latter story. The Netherlands was one of the founding members of the Atlantic Treaty Association at a time that it was felt that the European movement, but also the United Nations Association, which was being set up in the Netherlands and surely also in many other countries in Europe, should be complemented by a movement of Atlanticists, a civil society movement to complement the governmental cooperation structures that were being set up in the framework of NATO. The foundation of the Atlantic Treaty Association was the end of a consultation process. I think You, Mr. President, lined that out very nicely at the beginning of this meeting. You also mentioned the three wise men. And of course, The Hague was not the only city where consultations were taking place. But it was definitely the end of this consultation process. And I'd like to believe that it was no coincidence that the ATA was founded in this city, which was already then renowned for its international legal status, known for hosting several international organizations. And I really think it underscores the ATA's commitment to international law and to cooperative security principles, which remain so central to our work today. And then if we look at the founding treaty, what I think is interesting and worth noting is that, of course, it speaks about education, it speaks about the importance of the public debate in our various countries, but it also talks about the need to promote solidarity and to promote cooperation between the different associations united by the ATA. And I think this collaborative aspect is something that I'd like to underline as we come to the end of this important meeting today, because learning from one another and exchanging experiences really remains for me at the heart of what the ATA is all about. I very much look forward to seeing many of you over the next months. Very excited to hear that meetings are coming up in Athens and in other places. We will do what we can to facilitate future meetings in our respective partner countries. And I'm excited to continue working with all of you in this important endeavor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joest, for your conclusion remarks. I'd like to thank everybody for participation. Approximately 2 hours. It's hard to stay in the screen 2 hours. It's better to stay, in person. I remember what Solomon has said in Bulgaria, in General Assembly or in other General Assembly. I recall to your mind, Anne, that in the years 94, we have the last assembly in The Hague with the presence of the Queen in this time. So let's work together. As in my inaugural speech, I have said, as when you elect me president of ATA, this presidency will be collective. I repeat, collective presidency. All together, we need to have ideas, to put ideas together, to work with or not without protocol, and try to doing things together. So thank you. We will be again in different countries with initiative. Maybe before we meet again, before the summit in Washington, we expect what the leadership of public diplomacy offered to us in the summit from the summit. I like to say to the members of the board, I will inform next week, after 10 days, we put a day to discuss. I have already started with some colleagues to have a separate event, a small event, not small or big, like an event, specifically a side event of the Atlantic Treaty Association in Washington, more than the forum that we can. We try to work, it's hard, it's costly, but we try to do that with all connections, and I will inform everybody. So thank, first of all, our senior participants who offer a lot. I see now Robert Hunter, Robert High, and the junior participant, Georgia, and the others, the member of the board from Spain, from Greece, from Montenegro, from Finland, from Bulgaria again, from Albania, and so on. And we renew our meeting, even if it's not possible, to do with in person. Again, one more time with Unibar and Zoom. And I wish to you a good afternoon, a good evening in Europe, and a good afternoon in the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you.